excuse me. And I'm going to also share to our Facebook group because some folks have joined there to sign up with us, and perhaps for whichever reason are not able to make it into Zoom this evening. It's Friday night. I don't blame them. So thank you very much, folks, who have given us your Friday. And there we are. We're going live. I never like to trust the technology entirely, so I'm going to double check that that's actually the case. Not that I'm paranoid, but I've seen Terminator and I know what Skynet can do. There we go. It did work. Thanks. Thanks, internet. We're there. Perfect. So if you're watching on Facebook, you can come and say hello. I can still see your comments. It's just slightly less reliable. If you want to come and join us, I shall share the link, so you can come and join us in the Zoom room if you want to. And if you're watching this later, then you can still join in the conversation because we can still see all of your comments in the Facebook group. So do get involved. So welcome and thank you for coming and joining us. It's the first time that we've done this event, and I am I'm probably ridiculously excited about this, like Chris. I'm more excited actually about this than I was about Christmas. I haven't slept all week. It's brilliant. I'm very much looking forward to having a conversation with you all. There's lots of things that I want to share, and there's lots of lovely speakers who also have things that I know will be fantastic for you all. So I'm excited to see how this goes. Throughout, please do get involved, share anything that you'd like to share in the discussion. We're going to the chat's always open on Zoom and on Facebook, and we're going to make sure that there's time in between the sessions to have conversations and ask questions. So do get involved as much as you would like, and obviously there's a different variety of experience in the attendees today, so if there's things that you would like to share from your own experiences, then that's very much welcomed as well. So thank you very much. If you are watching from Facebook, you can come and join at the link that I've just put in the chat, or you can continue watching there. So whatever has brought you to the summit today, parents, students, teachers, tutors, welcome, all very welcome. I'd love to hear anything that you would like to share, and I promise you that the more you're willing to get involved in the session and share, the more you'll get back out of it, because that's kind of how it works. So to start in that vein, I'd love to hear if you could introduce yourself in the chat. I know lots of us know each other already, but for those of us who don't, it'd be very helpful to have a little introduction, your name, because that's not necessarily what it says on Zoom, what's brought you to the summit today, and maybe a little bit about what you're hoping to get out of this evening with us, or anything else that you'd like to share, what's in your mug, anything you'd like to share with us, very much welcome. And if you need to, if you're watching on your own, go and get your parent, go and get your teenager, get them to join in with us, because this is a group conversation. It'll be beneficial for all. If you've got pets, they're also very welcome. Always happy to see people's pets, bring them along too. And then during the presentations, I'm going to put everybody on mute so that everyone can hear the presentation, but there'll definitely be time for discussions in between each of the speakers, so don't worry about that. So why are we here? So during the holiday, as I said, I'm much more excited about this than I was about Christmas, because my brain did not switch off. So I was thinking about the reason why I set up Green Tutors. I think as we approach New Year, people kind of think about plans for the future and how the previous year has gone. And the reason I set up Green Tutors initially was from my own desire to be able to inspire some future generations to have a love of learning, and in particular STEM studies, which is my favourite. And I know that a lot of people, that can be dampened by the shadow of exams at the end of that process, so they don't necessarily enjoy the process that much. So I've been supporting hundreds of students over the last decade to be able to grow their love of learning, to grow their own self-belief, and I know that there are thousands more who are going to struggle this year, who aren't going to have that support. So I've been thinking about what can we do in 2023 to really make a difference to all of those students, to give them the tools that they need to make this year a happy one and not filled with anxiety. So all of this percolated over the holiday into this special one-off event with all of my favourite speakers, and they're all coming to generously share their pearls of wisdom for supporting your own well-being and for smashing your exams. I'm going to share screen for a little while to show you what's planned for today. So hopefully you can see a big green screen right now. So the schedule for today is slightly adjusted to the advertised schedule. We've actually made it a little bit shorter for you, so you'll have more time for your dinner. So hopefully you'll appreciate that. Unfortunately, Sarah Lynn's doesn't look like she's going to be able to join us today, which is a big loss for you, I'm afraid, because she's fantastic. But we'll make sure that she is able to share with you very soon. But you still have quite a hefty buffet. So do make sure that you're sitting comfortably, that you are maybe loaded up with snacks, that you've got drinks to hand, maybe get a Deliveroo ordered so that you can put your feet up for the rest of the evening. We're going to be here for the next couple of hours. We've got lots of things to share with you. So I'm going to first off introduce all of the speakers because they'll be in the conversation throughout the evening, and then you'll know who you're talking to. So unfortunately, Sarah Lynn wasn't able to join us today, but I'd still like to share her world with you, because if you haven't virtually or in person met Sarah Lynn before, then you've missed out. So my friend Sarah Lynn Hodder of Bettering Youth, I got to know her over the past year through working on several different projects together. She's an absolutely wonderful role model and a fantastic tutor. Sarah Lynn and the team at her company Bettering Youth are very much focused on supporting well-being for students of all ages, and they did absolutely fantastic work there on teaching the fundamentals of self-care, of boundary setting, and of well-being to youngsters who haven't quite developed those by themselves, or perhaps are dealing with particular struggles. The work that Bettering Youth do with these students is going to support them throughout their exams and throughout their entire lives. So we'll definitely bring Sarah Lynn to you in the future. We also have Rachel Stewart of Mindset Lab, who's going to talk with us about managing anxiety. So Rachel's a Cambridge University qualified academic coach, and she specialises in working in GCSE and A-level students who are studying in schools and also online. And her approach is to help students to build their study skills and to build the mindset and the motivation that enables them to become confident and independent learners. So that helps them to achieve their potential. So it goes kind of alongside everything that they're doing with their studies as well. And those students that develop those independent skills and self-motivation are those students that get into their top choice university spots. Rachel's passion is around seeing students develop their belief in themselves to improve their grades and often achieve more than they thought was actually possible. And she loves to support students with special educational needs and disabilities, which is fantastic. So she can help them see that their differences don't actually hold them back, and they can be an advantage in achieving their goals. So through her company Mindset Lab, she's worked with hundreds of students over the last 3 years, and she's seen students to use her own approach to improve their grades across the board rather than in just one or two subject areas. And then we also have Andrea Gadsby, who's the founder and the lead English tutor at Hope Tuition Clinic, who I've also worked with over the past year. And I first saw her speak at the Love Tutoring Festival, and I didn't want the session to end. She's absolutely fantastic. She's a specialist English teacher, classroom teacher, mentor, trainer, and curriculum lead across secondary English for the past 18 years. And when she advertised a session on literacy across the curriculum, I thought, what does a STEM tutor need with literacy? Well, she's taught me a lot, and I definitely recommend attending any of her events. So during the pandemic, she found her demand for online learning soared, and her English teaching expertise soon saw what she'd started as a side hustle of tuition growing into a business. So over the last 2 years, her business has grown by 5 times. So she's now scaling back. She's scaled back her teaching, and she's growing her tuition business and her consulting. Myself, if you don't know who I am, my name's Georgina, and I've been a personal tutor for the last 10 plus years. I specialise in maths and science tuition for GCSE and A-level students, and I'm also the lead science specialist for a qualified tutor. My background is in STEM, so I've worked in various different research laboratories since graduating, 2005, wow. But I've been tutoring on and off since I was 11 years old. I won't tell you when that was. I currently have a team of tutors with Green Tutors, and I coach them to deliver their tuition online and in person. And they're all the same position as me, so they've got backgrounds in STEM to inspire students to see their own potential in those areas. And in the free Facebook group, Turn GCSE Stress into Exam Success, which may well be where you're watching this today, I share advice and support for parents and students alike who are maybe looking to get to grips with the various aspects of GCSE preparation, like all of us today. Also, I don't want you to miss out on this part. So there's some prizes on offer for those who make it to the end of the session today. And I'll be sharing those with you later, as well as how you can win them, rather than sharing all of the details just now. But I'll just say it's certainly worth getting involved. Let's see who we have with us. I've been hearing lots of ding dongs whilst I've been talking there. Hi Dee, welcome to this. Oh, wow. Talking of STEM, meteorology, hello. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, it looks like all of the chats are working. Don't click on things because then the screens disappear. So first off, I'm going to start with goal setting for success. Why do I start with this? Because often this part is overlooked. So we might think that we know what we're working towards. We might think that we don't really need to think about defining our goals. We're passing exams. Or maybe it's something that we haven't really considered before, having goals. But when it's done well, it actually makes a massive difference to student outcomes. So students with a clear goal are much more likely to achieve those goals. And they're also more able to focus their efforts throughout their GCSE studies on the things that really matter, the things that actually make a difference to how their studies go. So I always start with this process with my students, and that's why I wanted to share this process with you today. So big question, what do you actually want is the first question, which is quite often met with, I just sort of pass my exams, but we can get more specific than that. So what do you actually want to accomplish? And what do you want to do next? So we don't just talk about GCSEs, we talk about what comes after GCSEs and what will that mean to you? Because all of the goals that you set should be aligned with this. GCSEs are not an end point, they're a step in the journey. So there'll be different answers to that question for every student that I speak to, and that will be their motivation for everything else that they do. And if we manage to identify in that conversation something that's actually really important to them and really personal to them, then it's really not going to be much of a challenge for the rest of the time working with them to motivate them, because that's important to them. Exams really aren't important to anybody. No one, well, very rarely do people think, oh, I really want to do this exam, it's going to be amazing. It's what the exam enables them to do that's important to them. So we want to focus on those things. We'll start with a little template like this. So often when we're focusing on our goals, we might focus on what's missing rather than the things that we already have. So I would encourage students to think about their strengths, and I'll ask them things that they're good at or things that they really enjoy, which are quite often the same. So what 3 things could you say that you're really good at? And you're welcome to share those in the chat if you would like to. And what 3 things would you like to improve on? Which might be not even related to exams at all, but those are going to be part of your goals, right? So it's important to think about things that you're good at and things that you would like to perhaps improve. They're going to be aligned with your goals. Be very specific when you set your goals. Make your goals specific enough that you can identify having achieved them. You don't want to say, I want to do well in my exams. That's not actually helpful at all. That's really unhelpful to say that I want to do well in my exams, because the mind being what it is, as soon as we achieve something, we think of what's left, how it could be better. So if you did do well in your exams, you're going to think, I didn't get perfect, so that could have been better. But if you'd been specific from the offset, then you can actually celebrate having achieved your specific goal. And I'd encourage you to set a goal for each of the subjects that you're studying. And remember to be realistic in those goals. We're not aiming for perfection. Perfection is not a good goal, and that's how we burn ourselves out. So think about the things that are actually important to you and what things that you can maybe let go of a bit. So where can you let go of a bit of perfectionist attitude and then make room for the things that actually matter really matter the most to you. And I'm not saying stop caring about your exams. Who cares if you fail at all? What I'm saying is it actually important to you to get 9s for all of your GCSEs? Or do you just need to pass and go on to what comes next? Or are some of them more important than others? Which ones are most related to what you want to do after school? Which ones are what are your targets at the moment? And do you think that you could achieve them or exceed them? Or do you think that you need to change them? So getting really specific encourages you to have that thought process and actually identify where you're maybe being a bit harsh on yourself, or what's actually important to focus on a bit more. That usually ends up with quite a lot of things still. So if we're considering students doing 9, 10 or even 11 GCSEs, that's quite a lot of goals that they might have just listed there. So I encourage you to actually prioritize that again. What are the top 3 goals? So if we've thought about what you want to do after school, once you've finished your GCSEs, what are you aiming to do next? That would help you to identify which of those goals are the most important for you. And maybe it's not even anything to do with exams. If you're hoping to do some apprenticeship or some sports placement, then those things will be more important than your exam grades. But you just have to pass probably maths and English to be able to get onto those. So pick the top 3 of all of those goals that you can achieve in the time that you have remaining, and decide that that's what you're going to focus on. And maybe you need to make some compromises to get there. If that's starting you thinking about some challenging things at the moment, you're very welcome to share those in the chat. And you do have the option in Zoom, rather than to everyone, you can click on there and send them just to myself if you feel more comfortable doing that, to share anything that you're maybe not sure of about your goals, and we can certainly talk through them. So once you've got your goals, the next step is to kind of work out how you're going to get there. What are the steps to get there? Because they can still seem quite big once we've made them specific and more realistic. They can still seem like a big goal of passing your exams. So we're going to identify what are the actual action steps to meet them. How much time do you have to achieve them? And then set up a timeline for your goal and break it down into small steps. So that reduces the overwhelm and makes it much easier to stay on track. Yeah, so what are the steps that you need to take to meet your goals? How much time do you actually have to meet those goals, bearing in mind that GCSEs start in mid-May and finish in mid-June generally? Break that plan down into smaller steps and spread the steps out over the time that you have remaining. And remember to just focus on one thing at a time, which is easier said than done, I know. One thing at a time. In fact, I have that permanently on my desk. Just one thing at a time, because it needs a constant reminder. Okay, and then another reminder that it doesn't always go to plan. We can spend ages making a plan, and I will spend quite a long time making a spreadsheet, but it can still go out the window. So we'd expect it to go off the rails a little bit. Maybe not quite throw away the plan, that's a bit extreme, but be prepared to start again. Because there will be bumps, and it won't go exactly as you hoped it would do. So we need to be prepared to adjust along the way. So I've made an example of one that I quite frequently hear from students. I want to be a vet. So in order to do that, I need to pass maths and English, and I need to get grade 6 for sciences because I need to take them for A-level to do the veterinary course. So the target grades are 5 for maths and English, and then 6 for the sciences, and for the others, I'm going to do my best, which is a nice, realistic, reasonable goal to set. And then the process, and this is a completely made up process, but this is what they might have decided for themselves. They're going to work out how much time do I have to revise each week. I'm going to make a weekly revision plan. I'm going to find myself a study buddy to keep accountable, and that's going to be somebody that actually wants to study rather than chat. I'm going to leave my phone downstairs at bedtime so that I actually go to sleep at bedtime and I don't watch TikToks, which is why I now leave my phone downstairs at bedtime. I'm going to sign up for a complete maths account because that's a really useful revision resource. I'm going to get some practice papers for maths and science and English, and I'm going to use those to monitor my progress and see if I'm meeting my target grades. I'm going to get my target grades in my mock exams, or else I'm going to review the process and see what I need to change. And if I'm finding it challenging, I'm going to speak to a tutor for those challenging subjects and get some extra help. So that's a completely made up example of a student, how their goals and their plan may look, but hopefully that's given you an idea of what that might look like for you. And if you wanted to go through that process a little bit more, there's a blog that I've written on exactly this, and I've just put the link to that in the chat. Let's also put that link on Facebook. Okay, so hopefully that got you thinking about what are your goals. If there's stuff that you'd like to share, do. I'm happy to give some feedback on that. Otherwise, hopefully you can have a think about that in your own time. And of course, you're very welcome to come and share things that you're thinking around goal setting in the Facebook group at any point. I'm happy to give feedback in there too. For those who are watching later who maybe didn't get that link, there's the link to go and read some more on that in the blog if you would like to. So I've just been talking for a long time and I'm very impressed that my voice is still working. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to share, or any questions they'd like to ask around goal setting while we're here? Still have a few minutes on our it's gone remarkably to time. I'm in awe of what's happened. No, perfect. If you think of things later, you're still very welcome to put stuff in the chat. Obviously, I'm not going anywhere. And later on, if you're watching on the recording, you can ask questions in the Facebook group whenever you would like to. Fab. Who else do we have in the session here? Yeah, gamification. Yeah, I'm getting more and more into this gamification, Bea. It works for everything. Even like, now this is super rock and roll. My favorite, most recent discovery for gamification is a housework personal training podcast. Just listening to someone and some upbeat music for half an hour doing my housework. How does that work? Because I hate housework. It actually makes me want to do it. How? Amazing. Hi, welcome. Thanks for coming. Perfect. Yeah, it is working. Look at this shiny house. Definitely working. It's rock the housework if anybody fancies giving it a go, but oh my gosh, it's amazing. I love it. Okay, excuse me, my throat has had enough. I'm going to hand over. Welcome. Thanks for coming, Rachel. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. I'm sort of trying to get my head around this rock the housework. Is it an actual PT that is training you like to get fit while you're sort of polishing the dining table type vibe?
It's entirely about the housework, but because she's tried to scrunch it down into a 30-minute session, it's like, right, now you got 2 minutes to vacuum the entire living room. It ends up being an exercise session.
I like it. I hate housework. And I'm glad that I am not talking now about housework, that's for sure, because I don't think it'll be any help to anyone. I hate it. So yeah, well, do you want me to just kick off, Georgina? Well, I just...
Yeah, I'll share that thing.
Yeah, need the link. Yeah, definitely. I feel like I need the link, but I don't want the link. So welcome everyone. My name is Rachel Stewart. I'm looking around to see if I recognize anyone. Obviously, I can't see anyone who's on the Facebook group, but on Zoom, I definitely recognize your face, Dee. I'm sure that we've come across each other on LinkedIn. We're connected, aren't we? And we both talk about sort of similar topics on LinkedIn. So what I'm going to talk to you about for the next roughly half an hour or so is exam anxiety, and I'd love this to be a conversation and to get your thoughts as we go along, and for the tutors that are on the line to share what are you seeing from your students. I'd love to know the pain points that are coming up for you, and then also for any parents that are on, right, what sort of things are you seeing? So I will share my slides, and my screen sharing is loading. It's saying to me, okay, can we all see that now? It's just trying to put it in presentation mode. So what I'm going to talk about is how to manage exam anxiety, and the kind of rough sort of flow of how we're going to do this tonight. Talk about where exam related anxiety concerns come from, what is causing them in terms of my experience as an academic coach. Can anxiety be a good thing? what are some of the practical steps that we can use to manage it? And I'd love to share with you, hopefully, the things I talk about and the resources that I can share afterwards are things that you can use at home with your teen. And I'd love to get your feedback on how that goes. So before I get into it, I'm going to share a little bit about myself in this very busy slide. So my name is Rachel Stewart. I am a Cambridge University qualified academic coach. I have been coaching for over 15 years. Most of that was during my career, which was in financial services and Lloyds Banking Group. And for the last over 3 years now, I have exclusively been coaching GCSE and A-level students to achieve their potential in exams. So I spend all day, every day, as obviously some of the tutors that are on here will be in the same boat as me, right? This is my full-time gig, and I over that time I've learned a thing or two, and that's what I'd like to share with you, some of the things that have really worked for my students. So why do I do what I do? The reason I set up Mindset Lab was to combine two passions. My first passion is for education, and the reason that I have that passion is because I am from a working class family, a solo parent working class family. I was the youngest of four, or still am the youngest of four, and I was the first person in my family to go to university. So we didn't have a tough life as such, but money was pretty tight. And there, we took the bus places. And I used to think when I was hanging out at a bus stop in the north of Scotland, waiting for a bus, I really don't fancy this being my life long term. I want to do something differently. And education was the platform that really allowed me to open doors and to change my life in lots of ways. So I'm super passionate about education. I got straight A's at school in Scotland. You can't get A stars in Scotland. You couldn't then, you can't now. And I got a first class degree in chemical engineering. And I don't say that to impress you, but rather to express to you that when I talk about some of the things that I talk about, that comes from a background of me being successful at passing exams too. And the other thing I'm super passionate about, and what really gets me out of bed in the morning, is helping people achieve their potential and believe in themselves. And that is what I love. I love seeing the results in students and the transformation when that happens. And yeah, that's what I'm passionate about. Along the bottom, I've got a list of partner schools and associations. I work with Tutor Doctor and sort of other tutors who come to me to supplement and enhance their tutoring. So about half the students I work with also have a tutor. And I also work at a number of schools local to me. But my main business and what I do most of the time is work with students in groups from all over the UK online on Zoom. And we work together through academic coaching programs. So another quick thing, just a little bit more about sort of kind of what I'm passionate about. And likewise, I'm sure for lots of tutors on the call, you will share this passion. So I am really passionate about special educational needs and helping people believe they can achieve their potential no matter what. Here in the bottom is a picture of my two children, Ava and Teddy. Unfortunately, both my children have genetic hearing loss. So just an unfortunate thing between me and my partner, we both have a recessive gene, and it's come together, and it means that our children have, and it's actually progressive, which means it's getting worse, and they have hearing loss. So that has made me, through lived parenting experience, really passionate about that belief and that desire and that knowledge that you can achieve your potential, whatever differences you may have. And I have the pleasure of working with lots of students from a hugely neurodivergent background. And my big belief is you have no idea what your potential is, because your potential expands as you move towards it. And that is a real guiding quote for me. So where does anxiety come from? So firstly, a couple of groups I work with suffer from anxiety for slightly different reasons. So I have parental anxiety. That is always pretty strong when students come to me. And I have student-related anxiety. So tonight I am going to talk about student-related anxiety, because I often find that the parental-related anxiety can be very helpfully managed if we can solve and support the student. So the root cause, this isn't a textbook root cause, by the way. This some of this comes from research, but a lot of it, the lack of control piece, comes from research, but it also comes just genuinely from what I see day in, day out. It's this feeling that we are anxious because ultimately we cannot control certain things, or we don't feel that we've got control. We don't feel that we've got a plan. We don't feel that we've got a clear solution. And that's often at the root cause of what I see day to day. So I'd love you to pop in the chat. What concerns cause anxiety in your teen or in students you work with? I'd love to hear from you. What sort of things do you see on a day-to-day basis, or do you hear that cause anxiety? And I don't know if you can see if anyone's talking in the Facebook group, Georgina, whether you can share that. If you see anything. So yeah, fear of failure. From, I'm going to try and pronounce this correctly. Is it Misbah? You can correct me. Come on the mic if to correct me on that. They'll forget everything in the exam. I definitely see that. Others being better than you. Yeah, this fear of judgment from others. 100%, definitely see that. Okay, so we've got quite a few things there, and I'm going to share with you some of the common ones. The exam will include something they've never seen before. 100%, definitely see that. And competition with others rather than self. That's a really interesting one, Nicola, and I see that a lot. Often I see that more with girls. I don't know if you would agree, Nicola. I don't know whether you're the parent of a girl or tutor of a girl, but I sometimes see that more frequently in girls. So here's some of the things that I see. So I am not good at X subject, so there's no point in trying. I'm okay in class, which is similar to sort of what Georgina said. I will forget everything in the exam, or I'm okay in class, but I'm not good at exams. I lack motivation. My friends want me to go out or to game. With 8, 9, 10 subjects, I just don't know where to start. Where can I even begin? This is so huge. I struggle to remember what I've learned, and I'm sure that Andrea will talk about that in the study skills session. And my teacher isn't very good. This is something else I sometimes see, and I'm sure that the tutors on the call will see that. This is one of the common reasons why people might go to a tutor. Or I procrastinate and I can't focus. So these are all examples. There are, of course, many more. So one of the things that can be helpful, and this can be a good thing, you can just draw these 2 circles on a bit of paper. This is an exercise you can do with students. It can be really useful. So it can be helpful to split our thoughts into concerns versus influence. And this is taken from Stephen Covey in his really famous book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Would highly recommend that if you haven't read it. Loads of great tips in that. And this is where we start to split out, right? What am I concerned about versus what I can influence? So of those things that are there, of those examples I shared, I'd love to invite you to pop numbers in the chat. Which of these can we influence? Okay, so Miss Bass said 4. We can influence 4, which is about, yeah, my friends wanting me to go out and game. Yeah, D saying 3, 4, 8. I procrastinate, I can't focus, I lack motivation. Again, a bit about friends. Okay, and yeah, Nicola's put lots. She's put 3, 8, 2, 6. So lots of them. So and can influence 3 and 4. Yeah, potentially everything. Yeah, but some are very unlikely. So yeah, Georgina, which one do you think is most unlikely that we can influence if you had to pick one? Yeah, D's put 7. The teacher, 100%. Yes, that would get my vote too. So yeah, potentially everything we can influence a bit, right? It depends how we frame it. So I won't go through all of these, but I'm not good at, let's say, math, so there's no point in trying. Trying to reframe that belief to, if I practice consistently, over time I will improve. And I sometimes put this to students: would it be unreasonable to believe if you practice something consistently that you wouldn't improve? And most of them will agree that would be unreasonable to believe that. So I'm okay in class, but I'm not good at exams. So we can practice. If I practice exam papers, I'll get better. I lack motivation. Okay, well, could I make a study plan and just do a little bit each day? My friends want me to go out. Okay, I want to probably go out with my friends too, and I want a game, and absolutely can do those things. But we can plan when to do that. We can start to manage that, and we can communicate that with people and set boundaries when we're available and when we're not. So I won't go through all of these. I definitely would agree that my teacher isn't very good would be the hardest one to influence, although I guess you might be able to move to a different teacher. You might be able to go to work around it a bit with study skills things. You could get a tutor. There are different things we could do to influence or put support in around it, even if we might not be able to directly influence the thing. So what is useful here when we sort of start to just draw these simple circles and just map out, like, what am I concerned about versus what I can influence? So some things we definitely cannot influence, like what questions are going to come up in the exam. We have no influence over that whatsoever. You can't control that. But so there are definitely things that we are concerns and we can't do anything about. But when we play in this space and we focus on there, and that's the main thing we're trying to get from this exercise, when we focus on the concern, our circle of influence gets smaller. And how do we feel when we focus on our concerns? Does anyone want to pop in the chat? How do we tend to feel when we focus on our concerns? Panic. Yes, Georgina. Helpless. Definitely, those types of things, definitely agree with all those things. And I love the fact students are always complaining about their teacher. If I believe that, I think they were all terrible. Yeah, so we tend to feel these sort of panic, worry, anxiety, because we're focusing and we're thinking about it. And sometimes these thoughts, negative spiral, says Parth, definitely. And I'm sure, even though we're not sitting exams for most of us on the call, we can relate to these things happening in our own world, in our own life, that we start to really spiral around concerns, and we can get into a negative spot with that. How much progress do we make when we focus on our concerns? Zero. Yeah, not very much. So yeah, zero. Yeah, not very much, right? We tend to not make much. If we have no control, then Georgina says that yes, absolutely. So how do we feel if we focus on our circle of influence, right? We tend to feel more confident, more in control, more anxious. How much progress do we make? More, for sure. And I think when talking this exercise through with students, and I do this with all the students I work with, they can relate to it, and then they can start to visualize this and come back to it. And it's a very simple model. And the key sort of takeaways are, where focus goes, energy flows. What we choose to focus on expands. And this is my favorite one, even if it is 100% justified, i.e. you have the worst teacher in the world, complaining is not a strategy. So even if it's justified, yeah, we can, complaining is not a strategy. Tony Robbins, yes, Mishpa, where focus goes, energy flows is a favorite thing that Tony Robbins says. Absolutely. The next thing I want to talk about is, can anxiety be a good thing? So I'd love us to have a little bit of an explore around this, understanding stress versus performance. So in this graph, on the y-axis, we have high performance at the top, low performance at the bottom. And on the x-axis, we've got pressure, stress. Sometimes it's called arousal in the Yerkes-Dodson curve. It's the same sort of vibe, pressure along the bottom, low, moderate, high, very high. So I'd love you to pop in the chat. What do we think the relationship is between stress or anxiety and performance? So is it where we have high performance where we've got low pressure, and then as pressure increases, performance directly drops? Do we think that performance increases as pressure increases, which is B? Do we think that actually it's okay at low and high, but in the middle it's not so helpful for performance? Or do we think it's D, where actually we perform at our best with sort of moderate to high stress, but not so good in the extremes? So D is saying D. Doesn't it depend on personality types from Mishpat? Yeah, I think I'm sure there's always part of that, Mishpat. Not everything is the same for everyone. No one is a textbook, right? We're talking about averages. I would definitely agree with that. D, Partha said D, and Georgina saying D, boredom isn't helpful either. I like a deadline dance, and Ian saying sort of the same, right? Too little or too much is unhelpful. So absolutely, right? And for some of you guys, you might have seen this before. This is the Yerkes Dodson human stress performance curve. And essentially is saying exactly as Dee said, there is a sweet spot, okay? So when we are at boredom, when we're at the left-hand side, and I definitely work with students who are not motivated and who are absolutely at that boredom threshold, they are down at the bottom. That is not helpful to get us off Netflix, to get us out of bed in the morning, and to get us doing the thing. Equally, if we are at the very high stress and strain, and I see this with students who are working incredibly hard sometimes, often with really ineffective revision techniques, which does not help. So a lot of note taking, rewriting of notes, organizing their folders, putting things into rainbow colored order, all of these type of faffy activities that aren't really getting us anywhere. Sometimes I see them getting into this very high strain because they're doing a lot, but it's not getting them anywhere. I also sometimes see this is sometimes called the zone of delusion. I'm sure for the tutors, you guys might have seen this too, where students believe that they can't stop because actually I need to be productive. I need to do all the things, especially around exam season, right? I can't take a day off. I can't take any time off. I can't leave the house. I need to just study all the time. And actually that's really unhelpful and it's not sustainable. So we want to be in this sort of optimal performance, right? We want some anxiety. It is healthy. It is a human emotion. It's helpful to get us from A to B. We need some stress in the system, but it's really important to manage this. And something that can be helpful is also to think about what way are we trending as a student. And I often get them on Zoom to draw a little line on the screen. One, I get them to mark where they are. And that, again, this can be a helpful exercise to work through with a team. Print this out, say, mark where you are this week. Where do you feel like you are? And then what direction are you traveling in? So again, if someone's at strain and they're traveling left, that might be okay because we might be in strain. It might have just been their mocks, or they might be in their mocks right now, and we might be moving back. But if we find that we're not at a time which is exam season and they're in strain and they might be moving to the right, then that's something we definitely want to start thinking about, right? What habits and behaviors do we need to move us back down the curve? Now, I haven't planned to talk about a lot. I will talk briefly about what those habits and behaviours are at the end, but we can definitely talk about more of that in the Q&A if people would like to discuss that. So the last thing I want to talk about managing exam-related anxiety, past papers. When do we think we should start past papers? I'd love you to pop it in the chat. How many months before an exam should we start to think about past papers, do we think? Past paper questions. Okay, so Nicola's saying pepper questions throughout the year. Agree with Nicola. Yeah, so we've got people saying, so kind of like a good 9 months before the exam. I'm thinking Dee and Nicola are saying. Yeah, and Mishpa's saying that as well. As soon as the student is confident enough, from Georgina. Yeah. And I love your comment earlier, Georgina, saying I spend a fair amount of time out there myself to get there myself. It's difficult to get the right balance with stress. And I definitely agree with that. I think we all can relate to that. You can show a student how they progress by showing them the same question over time. Love that, Dee. Yeah. So I would totally agree with all of these things. And the way I sort of describe this to parents and students I work with, I talk about this as the 1% principle. So at GCSE, if we think about it, roughly, right, we are at school 9 to 3, give or take, about 6 hours a day, and then we are at school 5 days a week. That's about 30 hours a week. We do that for roughly 39 weeks a year if we're a state school, and we do that for 2 years because this is a long old program. So we're at school roughly, it's probably about 2,300 hours, take up your lunchtimes, you're somewhere around the 2,000 hour mark. If we do 10 subjects at GCSE, and roughly you'll spend about 40 hours in exams, so roughly about 4 hours in exams, give or take. Again, some papers are slightly longer, it depends on your makeup, coursework, etc. roughly. So when we sort of start to look at this, you're about 1% of your time in exams, and obviously this will vary. A lot of students will do less than 10 GCSEs. But you're broadly about that. And the way I describe it to students as, if we think about it, for most subjects now, with the exceptions of things like art, drama, DT, right, for the vast majority, since the curriculum change, it is all exam focused. That is what counts. And if we look at it in a kind of pie chart, what counts is the exam. But of the total pie of time that we spend in GCSEs over 2 whole years, 99% of it doesn't count for anything really. So you can have the most beautiful rainbow colored folders with the most beautiful tabs and the most beautiful notes with pen and ink drawings of the historians that you have studied. At the end of the day, we need to start with the end in mind, which for those of you that have read the Covey book, he talks about a lot, right? Start with the end in mind. Where are we trying to get to with this? We're trying to nail the exam. That is the objective, because we ultimately want the grade, because that's the key that unlocks the next door. So it's really about optimizing for exams and thinking really seriously about how do we do that. So one of the techniques that students can use to do this and to break it down and to do what Nicola and Mishba and Dee have all talked about, right? We want to pepper these questions in, is to use the exam paper power hour. So with the exam power hour, what we're doing here, we are choosing an exam question, and I've got here, Google your subject, right? Your exam board and your level. So for example, you Google AQA, GCSE biology, or you might use a resource which is fab, like Cognito, which is brilliant, and that contains all your exam questions right next to the mark schemes, right next to a video if you struggle. But broadly, go out there, Google it, find yourself a question or a set of questions. Then revise what you need to know to answer those questions. So rather than just revising topics, think, hold on a minute, I'll start with the end in mind and I'll think, what types of exam questions might I want to answer? And I'm just going to focus on revising to answer them. Then I'll spend 20 minutes answering them, and then I'll spend 10 minutes marking them. So another thing I talk to students about all the time, and often they're not that confident to do this, but is to use the mark scheme. Exams are not a test of intelligence. They are not a test of how well you know the subject. They are in fact a test, I would argue, scheme, and how well you know what you need to write to get marks, especially in a subject like biology, which I know, Georgina, you're passionate about. You need to know that mark scheme. If you write thin and they're looking for narrow, you won't get the marks, even though arguably you've got the right thing. So really encourage students to focus on using the mark scheme. If you're not sure, that's fine. Ask your teacher for feedback, certainly for essay-based questions. And I know Andrea's obviously an English teacher. It's harder to mark your own essays, but I would always encourage students to do that. And I, in my programs, go one step further as well, and also talk to them about reading the examiner's report and seeing, where did other students go wrong with this exam? It's not something you're going to need to do all the time, but I definitely would encourage them to look at the examiner's report, and definitely for students at that higher end grade boundary. So anyone that's wanting to get 6+, you know, certainly absolutely in the 8s and 9s category, this is what these types of things are going to be what can get you those higher grades, because you really understand that exam. And Dee said mark schemes are not easy to decipher. I would agree with you, Dee. I actually think, though, there are harder schemes than maths out there to decipher. Essay-based subjects make maths look comparatively easy because at least there's a right and a wrong. But I'm definitely with you, and not all students will feel comfortable marking their own work. But in my experience, over time, students do feel, they get used to it, they get it, and certainly at the higher end. Ian said, I like this idea. I do chat to students about the mark scheme. Yeah, definitely, I really try and do that. And I think that's a useful, potentially, session within a tutoring session to say, have a go at marking your own work, and why don't we in this session talk about how to understand this mark scheme. Examiner's report, super important, Nicola saying, for A-level biology. Oh yeah, 100%, Nicola. They can seem like code, so students need guiding on how to use these. Yes, definitely. And in the work I do with schools, sometimes teachers will say to me, oh, I'm really nervous about that. I don't want you to talk to my students about using mark schemes. But I think the challenge here is not to ask them not to do it, it's to help and support them to do it effectively for themselves, because ultimately that allows them to just rinse and repeat and superpower their study independently. And at the end of the day, that's what we all want, is independent learners with a real love of learning. So talk lots about that, right? And this is the other thing I say to students: embrace the suck. You will be rubbish at past papers when you first do them. That's okay. That's life. That's the way it's meant to be. They're hard. If they were easy, everyone would be cracking out nines, right? And I love this quote from Niles Bohr. He says, "An expert is a man who has made all the mistakes which can be made in a very narrow field." So that's what I put to students. This is how you become expert. You go into this thinking, what I need to do, rather than thinking how much I can get right, let's think about how much I can learn through all the mistakes I'll make. I'll get loads wrong. That's okay. Because what's going to happen if I do the same paper, which I know, Dee, you talk about doing with your students, is repeating the same questions over and over again, right? Or doing it, you're going to get better, right? So even if you get a 2 the first time you do your chemistry past paper, what's the chances you're going to get a 3 or a 4 if you have it go again? And if you can start this early enough, you've got enough runway where you can have done stacks and stacks and stacks of past papers. And it would be unreasonable to think that if you do that and you do stacks and stacks and stacks of past papers, that you won't get better. Of course you will. So my sort of takeaway points on this, I didn't really talk about this one just because of time, but in terms of the Yerkes-Dodson stress performance curve, and I'm sure we can all relate to this, whether we're students or not, sleep and exercise are 2 hugely important things to helping us manage our anxiety. And I see this a lot. I'd love to know in the chat from any students, if you talk to, if you see this from the students, from any tutors, or if you see this with the students or any parents we've got on, sleep and not getting enough sleep. I see this so commonly amongst teenagers that really want to go to bed at 1, 2, even 3 in the morning. And then they say, oh, I really struggle with motivation and focus. And we have a discussion around how sleep might be influencing that. Do young students have extreme in exercise, either a lot or very little? Ian saying. I don't know, Ian, is that a question or is that thought we can maybe take that in a minute. I'd love to know more about that. Yeah, we can let's have a chat about that in a second. But yeah, sleep and exercise, really, really important parts of being resilient, helping to manage our anxiety and helping to go back down the anxiety curve. The other thing that can really help us if we're at the top of our anxiety curve is just taking a break. And that can feel counterintuitive. Get out of that zone of delusion and realize that what you need this weekend is to do nothing. And to just, maybe it is just to watch Netflix or take the dog for a walk or spend time with your friends. I would say all of those things would be better than spending your time on TikTok or doing something sedentary, right? Always get out, connect with other people is what I'd encourage students to do. But sometimes what we need to do is just do nothing. And that is the best thing for our results. We are playing a long game. This is a marathon, not a sprint. My second big tip would be always focus your revision around past papers. Start with the end in mind. We're not trying to become, sadly, in my opinion, the best historians in the world or the best mathematicians in the world. At the end of the day, we are studying because we want a great grade. And if we want that, we need to learn the game of exams. Reviewing out of school commitments can be really helpful for parents to support their teen with, especially in the few months before exams, so that we can help to manage that anxiety and we can help keep things in a nice, happy place. Self-belief, huge part, probably the core foundation of all the work I do with students, is helping them to feel confident in their ability. That is the foundation of everything. You can, that is not there, in my opinion, students will not achieve their potential. You can have the best study grades and study techniques in the world, but if you don't believe in yourself, it's not going to happen. You're going to limit yourself. Front load any support you decide to invest in, and I say this loads. If you want to invest in support, do it early while you've still got loads of runway. What is very stressful, I've had parents come to me, and I'm sure the tutors on the line will agree with this. You get calls in May, can you help me out? It's difficult in May, not because that student doesn't have loads of potential, not because we can't teach them all these lovely techniques that can absolutely help them. They just don't have the runway to make the progress that they have at this point or even earlier. And then lastly, we only need to get 1% better every day. Massive believer in marginal gains. They compound over time. These small changes in our performance each day, little tweaks, add up to huge changes in results if we can give ourselves the runway to implement them. So yeah, that is a few thoughts from me. I'll stop sharing now. I'd love to open it up to discussion, and Ian's thoughts. I don't know if you want to come on the mic, Ian, and just share a bit more around what you're sort of thinking there, because I'd love to chat to you about
that. Hi, yeah, just to say, you know, some students maybe have loads of exercise, so maybe it's they go to the gym a lot, they have a sport they're committed to, they do football, they do netball or something, so they have lots and lots of exercise compared to others who maybe when it's exam season who are not committed to a team or something or a gym, they have very little exercise. So when it comes to managing that for those people is probably even harder at that age than it might be to somebody who's in work, let's say.
Yeah, in terms of just sort of managing the balance and keeping it
managing the balance, and how does that impact on their own ability to manage exams, say.
Yeah, and I think all of these things, it's all about a balance, isn't it? And I think you raise a good point, and I definitely have seen students who are very into their sport. I can think of some boys in particular that I've worked with, and they compete at a really high level, and girls as well. They might be county players of this, and then they also do that, and they're great sports people. And actually that can be difficult too, can't it, to not allow it to take over if we want to really focus potentially, especially in the last 3 months.
I have some, like one extreme that one of my students is actually in Spain at the moment for a month, who out of school, so practicing for sport, and it's the exam year. But then, I know that's their choice, but then how does that impact on in the near future as to what happens for their exams in May or June, etc. And they will work around it. They will do their best, but it doesn't. That's an extreme compared to what you're talking about, probably on a normal basis.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, it's a choice, isn't it? And it's what you're choosing to prioritize and all of that. I mean, I'm a massive fan of sports and exercise, and I see students use it to great effect. But yeah, my view would be, ideally it's a balance, but obviously if that person wants to go there, just like you said, that's their choice. Yeah, definitely.
For this particular person, it's this idea, I believe anyway, that I think their future will be in this sport, so they're committing to this sport, and the exam is second choice really, and they will pass their exam, I believe, but they've made that choice that they're not going to commit to getting an 8 or a 9. They're going to commit to pass, and the sport comes first.
Yeah, no, definitely, really good points, Ian. Others thoughts that's running through people's heads?
I think it's just for everybody, for all the teachers on here and others, it's everybody's different. It goes back to that idea of, you've made some great points with that, with what you're, and I like your power hour, that's brilliant. So but it's different for everybody, isn't it? So you've got to manage your own emotions and an anxiety. All students do in context of what they do in their life, really.
100%, right? We're all different, and we've all got different wants, needs, pressures. And I think it might have been Nicola that said about the Yerkes-Dodson stress performance curve. Is it not different for everyone? And I think it is different for everyone. That's the truth. The basic of the theory is the same for us all, but then how that plays out is different. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ian. I can see Andrea's here, and we're now at 5:30. Anyone else want to share any thoughts or ask any questions?
Well, thank you very much, Rachel. That's really interesting. I think as you were speaking to Ian there, you reminded me of a student I had who was very much like that. He was a massive sports fan since pretty much the whole of puberty. I think he was in multiple sports clubs, and then when it got to GCSE years, we actually had a very honest conversation about this. Like, he said he loved his sports, but he was exhausted with multiple sports clubs, plus revision, plus after school study clubs, plus tutors. And in the end, he actually took a very sensible decision himself to drop out of those sports clubs for that year. And I was really impressed with him. He took a really sensible decision. So definitely a difficult balance to get. Poor guy.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
100%. Yeah, and I've had students who've done the same as well. Like they still want to do their sports, but maybe have peeled back, like, you know, pared it back a little bit from like the odd team, or prioritize like one sport over another, etc. But yeah, definitely, it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing that. There's some fantastic tools in there. I'm going to be having some very interesting conversations again with my students this week. And
Oh, good.
yeah,
It's helpful.
thank you very much. And I'll share, I'm going to, obviously all of this is coming out after the session today, and I'll share some ways that you can get in touch with Rachel again if you'd like to ask any more questions or find out more about the work that she does. I think it's very helpful for all students alongside their tuition. Yeah, we're still being spoiled. We've got Andrea up next. How you doing, Andrea?
Hey, Georgina. Yeah, it was great. Just caught the end of it there, as obviously as helpful as ever with your advice. But yeah, wing my way back from work, from school, and yeah, been looking forward to this all week.
Fun never stops, eh?
It doesn't, I know. Yeah, but sleep when you're dead, as they say.
Yeah. Where would you put yourself on that stress curve today, Andrea?
I'm all right. I'm just glad it's the weekend.
Yeah, perfect. Oh, thank you very much. So, as we said at the beginning, Andrew's a specialist and experienced English tutor, teacher, and teacher trainer. So has put together a collection of tips for us around the practical elements of revision. What do we actually do when we've decided how much study time we need and what we can cope with? What do we actually do?
Right. Well, thank you for that intro. Yes. Rachel actually complements what Rachel said, actually, because she was talking a lot about, you know, sort of approaches and attitudes and feelings and managing sort of, the emotions and the mental health of when they're surrounding their revision. Whereas what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how we can plan our revision effectively, so that our mental health is protected and that we're doing it sort of and setting up really just good study habits for life, really, as well, which I think is so important. So I'm just going to share my screen and talk through a few ideas that might help people. So we'll go on to my ideas here. So I've got 5 I'm going to talk about. We're looking at how can you make the most of my time left before GCSEs. So the very fact that people are attending this session today means that they're ahead of the curve. Okay, because we've still got 4 or 5 months left before the GCSEs kick in. So when Rachel was talking about getting in early and making sure that you're doing things gradually, that is really, really important. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the little and often idea, particularly at the moment. There is a bit of a carousel in schools at the minute of mock exams that seem to happen, some before Christmas, some now, some coming up. A school I work in, they're happening next week. So there's a carousel of mocks going on almost constantly now until Easter in different schools. So it's about how we can do little and often with our revision. I'm going to talk about what's called space practice, about planning our revisions, so planning our sessions well, then some revision strategies, and then Rachel's probably already said a lot of this, but about being kind to yourself and about sort of how important that is for success. So on to the first one. One of the things I talked about with the revision strategy, and I think it might tie in with Rachel's power hour. Some of you may be familiar with the Pomodoro technique. Now, I like using this personally for working as well, because otherwise I can sometimes get lost, or I might sort of procrastinate. And the idea is about staying fresh, and it's about picking a task that you might want to do. So I'll talk about how you can plan your revision in a moment, but the Pomodoro technique, for those who are unfamiliar with it, is based on the cooking tomato here, and it was from an Italian, because it's French for tomato, who was trying to look at ways that he could time what he was doing. And he found sort of to make sure that he could time what he was doing succinctly, and he just found kitchen timer like that, and that became the Pomodoro technique. And so the idea is that you pick a task that you've got to do, and you just set a timer for 25 minutes. You work on that task until the time's finished, and then you take a 5-minute break. So it might be that you haven't actually finished the work that you wanted to do in that hour, in that 25 minutes, but then you can pick it up again after your 5-minute break. And so if you do 4 Pomodoros, So you do 25 break, 25 break, 25 break, 25 break. Then you can have a longer break, 15 to 30 minutes. And it just keeps you mentally fresh. I don't know about you, but after about 40, 45 minutes, I start to drift unless I've got things really chunked up. And it just encourages that movement that Rachel was talking about as well, about taking breaks, making sure that you are not just being too sedentary for too long. So the Pomodoro technique has actually been proven to really help keep people alert, keep sharp, whether you are working in, you know, sort of the adult world or for students. And then I've got another idea here about how you can plan your time. So this is something I put together for a student before their mock exams in sort of November, December. And it was just about trying to make sure that you've got the tasks that you want to do broken down. You can't just say revise English, revise physics. What is it that you want to revise within that? And when I've gone through some of the revision strategies you can do, you can apply them to, for example, an hour here. So this is somebody who was revising for their mock. So there was quite intensive revision going on every night for maybe a couple of hours a night. What we're looking at here, perhaps between now and May, is just gradual sort of revisiting of your learning. And so what we had here was obviously a day off. Football still has to happen, as we've been talking about. This week they were looking at English, physics and maths, and you can see here with the physics that we broke it down into a particular topic. Then we chose some revision strategies that we were going to apply to that topic. Now I'm going to talk to you about look, cover, write, check in a moment, but that was for 20 minutes. Then there was some sketching, some drawing of an isotope or a flow chart. So that was a different kind of revision strategy. And then a summary of the top 5 things that were learnt. So this is about choosing specific revision strategies and then applying them to a plan. So that all of a sudden when we went through this student then went, okay, I'm focused now. I don't have to sit down for an hour and not know what to do. And then we did the same for English and then maths, and then English again. And then the weekends, we just had a little bit of last week revision. And I'll talk a little bit about spaced practice, which is what this comes into in a minute. And last week means that you're looking at what we did last week. So a flashcard test of English language, that was the week before. Geography, lakes and rivers, which was the week before, and looking at some French from the week before. So it is about balance, and our memories work better with spaced, what we call spaced practice. So you're not sort of just cramming English into one week. You're not just going to revise English that day or maths that day. You are moving it around and you're spacing things out, and then you revisit it, which is called retrieval. So for example, even though it's English, physics and maths this week, the testing at the weekend, the following week would be English, physics and maths, and you might bring in a little bit of geography. So it's just about having that balance and having quite a good sort of map of how your revision might look. So that's a really good idea. And at this stage of GCSEs, it might be that you just want to do, for example, maybe just an hour, an evening, you know, a couple of times a week before, you know, it gets sort of built up and you build up the revision time. And so I'm going to go through next a few ideas about what some of these particular tasks might be that you would like to do. And from that, as part of this revision strategy, was based on a timetable that they put together. Now that's really, really crucial when you are down to the business end of sort of the weeks before your exam. So sort of, I always advise from Easter onwards, start getting a revision plan for that sort of final month in place, where you're sort of creating these hour stretches, or you can do your Pomodoro stretches that really help you focus on trying to make sure that you can factor in all of those downtime activities that Rachel was talking about, as well as getting the revision in. So a timetable works really well. And as you can see here, we had some sort of, I was talking about science, make sure you have your tea, English, maths, and then a bit of relaxation at the end. So that was just something that they were doing. And we tried to build it around, for example, what this what this boy was doing at the time, so that they could still get it done. And so this, I'll talk about that in a minute. So this idea of now strategies that we can go through, and I've got a selection here that I'm going to talk through really, really quickly. And any that you quite like the sound of, please do make a note, because as soon as you sort of put this into YouTube or Google, there are plenty of videos and support that help you to be able to work out how you can best use this for yourself. But these are things that I use with a lot of them with my students, and they are proven, a lot of these, to really help with retaining your memory, basically being able to access your long-term memory and bring it into your working memory. So the lightness system, we might be familiar with that. Now that is a flashcard based system. Now flashcards are best used, and I've done a video on this as part of on my Facebook page, but you have a fact or a quote, and then often there is an image on the other side or a definition, and the idea is that you test yourself with them. And so the lightness system is a testing method using flashcards. So you will test them, so you'll have an everyday pile, and then you'll have a Tuesday, Thursday pile, and you'll have a sort of Friday pile, as you can see here. And you'll lay your flashcards down, and then you pick them up and you sort of try and guess what is on, you test yourself, but what is on the back of the flashcard. If you get it correct, you then put it in your Tuesday pile. And then if you pick up the flashcard and you get it wrong, you put it back in your everyday pile, so that you'll pick that up tomorrow, and then you'll have to do it again. Then when you get to your Tuesday, Thursday pile, if you get that one right again, it goes into your Friday pile, so that you are moving your flashcards around in more disparate boxes, the better you know the information. And the ones that you keep getting wrong, you have to keep revisiting, and so on and so forth. If you get it wrong, for example, in your Tuesday, Thursday box, it then goes back into your everyday box. Now, there's plenty of things on YouTube about the lightning method, but it's a really good way of actually doing something functional and useful with flashcards that students understandably do like to use. And the Freya model is another great graphic organizer as a good way of revising key concepts that you might have in a topic. So you might write a definition of a concept. So one I was looking at could have been photosynthesis. Then you might write, what are the characteristics of that? What does photosynthesis do? Some examples for the way that it, different plants that it might affect. And then some non-examples. So I was just talking about this with a science teacher today about non-examples and misconceptions. And obviously there are plenty, as I'm sure Georgina will testify in science, plenty of misconceptions. And the one today was about respiration, where some students in year 9 thought it was breathing. And I was supporting a science teacher with that misconception. And we were talking about how you might revisit that. So the non-examples are almost as important as the examples, because they address misconceptions. So whatever concept it is in your subject, the Freya model really, really helps. And this one, the look, cover, write, check, might be something that we remember from children being at primary school. We often used to do it with spellings. I remember my kids coming home from school when they were at primary school and having to sort of remember their spellings. And the look, cover, write, check is just that. You're given an idea, sort of a concept maybe like this. You look at it, you might then cover it up, write down what you can remember about it. So it could be, for example, from a flashcard or a bit of revision notes. And then you write it down, then you check how much you've got correct. Now, often what I then say to students is, in a different coloured pen, when you're looking at what you've got wrong, write in the gaps, what you've missed. So you know next time where your kind of gaps are in your memory. So that's those three. And the next one's a good key one, is a brain dump. So going back to the ideas of anxiety that people might have surrounding revising, just put down what it is that you know, and then you can start to organize it from there. A brain dump is sometimes the best way just to get started and to get those anxious ideas sort of out and onto a page. And it's amazing once you start, particularly if there's no pressure on how to organize it, how to write it, that sometimes the ideas just flow. And I'm a big fan of graphic organizers. So this is of an example. So the idea is that you've just got flowcharts, pictorial diagrams that help you to sort of understand your notes in more than just a written form. And I've got Miro one here, because I do use Miro a lot with my students, which is a great website that helps you to sort of build and stretch out different sort of concept maps, Venn diagrams, just to help sort of present your information in a different way. And if students are still at school, Obviously, at the minute, one thing that I try to get a lot of my students to do is to think about their note taking and sort of making sure that that is the key thing that they will revise from. Some of you may be familiar with the Cornell notes. They're very, very easy, and the best ideas always are. It's just about separating your A4 notebook like this that all our students have for when they're at school into 3 sections. Your biggest section is where you take your main notes like you would normally at school, but then you have a wider margin at the left hand side that has keywords that might come up in the lesson that you write at the side. It might have some questions that you're not sure of, so you might write them down, like thinking, oh, or this reminds me of, or I need to ask. There could be some ideas that it relates to. And then at the bottom, across the bottom, there is a summary. So it could be that you write the 3 key things that you've learned in that lesson or from that note page. And what this does is this keeps students' attention focused. Now, it's known that students' attention does focus in lessons, but if their note taking requires them to be focused on different areas of their note taking, it retains their attention, and so there's more likely their learning is going to stick. So it really does work, and particularly for those students who's like we've all seen those books, some of us are where their notes are all over the place. Cornell note taking is a simple way that they can do it. And sketch notes as well could be where you draw some images, you might draw some diagrams to help aid your note taking. So encourage the students and the young people that you are with to maybe experiment with how they note take. I don't note take in the same way at all in different books. I might draw diagrams in some, mine will have some bullets, then they might have some drawings. If you think about the way you take notes, and we often still encourage our students to write linear sentences and ideas. And yes, that's good for the exam, but perhaps not for their brains. So yeah, a sort of more inventive note taking perhaps. And just a couple more. This is where friends can get involved, or parents. Teach someone else. As it says here, you haven't fully learned something until you can teach someone else. When I was doing some lesson walks today and observing some teachers, the first thing I do is ask students, what are you learning? What have you been learning about so far? Can you tell me today, like I said, can you tell me what density is when I was in a science lesson? And if they can't tell me, then there's a problem with how much they understand. And it's the same with us. If someone, sort of said to me, what is a metaphor as an English teacher and tutor, if I can't tell them what it is simply, then I don't know what it is. So get the young people, maybe if you're a parent, get the young person who lives with you to try and maybe teach you about what they're doing. My son does it all the time with his maths. I don't ask him, he just loves it and he tells me what he's doing. And then the next one is mind maps, which is another great one. You can see here, they're very different to sort of what we might call the traditional spider diagram. They are sort of filtered into sections. So I've just got one here from a holiday, and they've got an activity section, transport section, accommodation, family section, and the venue, the place they were going, Tuscany. That's just a really simple one. But again, if you've got a topic that you're doing, you can have different legs of your mind map that focus on different subtopics of that revision. And then, as you can see, everything else springs off that. So mind maps, again, are another example of a great graphic organizer that you can use. The one that they like to shy away from, past papers. Okay, we need to do them. That's the performance element of what they are revising for. Now, it might be that they don't sit and do one in a full sitting, but they want to attempt at least part of it. And that can be something like a weekend task if they've been doing lots of bits of revision, and it probably will incorporate a lot of what the teachers are giving them to do anyway. But past papers, we cannot avoid them. We shouldn't. And then finally, some of my favorites is dual coding. Big fan. And you'll see I've been doing this actually throughout this presentation. Dual coding is where you use either written and visual, or you use visual and spoken. So the whole problem that we sometimes have is that we get overloaded by things being written either on a slide or on pieces of paper, and then we just read that out. So what we're doing is we're overloading ourselves with the same information. What dual coding does is it presents something in an image, which is then supported by a spoken cue. So you're listening to something as well as seeing it at the same time. And because it's represented in two different ways, you're visually hearing something as well as listening to it, you're visually seeing it, that aids retention of information. So what you might do is you might be thinking back to the likeness system, and automatically in your head, you've got that flashcard picture. And that reminds you about what it is, and it's retained in your brain. You might look back to the mind map and remember those colours, rather than me just telling you what a mind map is on slides and reading that out. Instead, I give you an image to help you retain that information. And you can see here with my little Venn diagram what that does. Whoops, there. So you've got this idea that the combination of visual and verbal ideas makes something more memorable. And then finally, and this one is something that I think students might enjoy and that you can support them with, young people, memory palaces. I'm so exciting that I was listening to Radio 4 about memory this week, and they were talking about these memory competitions that they have in China, where millions of people apparently go to memory camps. And the North Koreans apparently have come in and they've broken all of these records, and there's a sort of a bit of a standoff between all of these incredible memory people who can memorize the most insane amount of information. So what was really interesting for me when I was listening to this was some of the strategies that they use, because one of the key things that people come to me with as a tutor, and it might be the same for any of the other tutors here, is in English, how do I remember quotes? How do I remember the text? How do I remember what to do in the exam? How do I remember that information? And that then causes anxiety, which can lead to a block. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, they are a test of memory, a lot of exams. So we have to play the game. And one of the things they were talking about was memory palaces, which some of you may be familiar with. And you go on little trips around your house. We've all got routines that we have in the house. Right? First thing I do when I get up is I take the dog off me, because he's usually sensed I'm awake and he's up. And then I might get out of bed, might check my phone, might have a drink of water. And it's about attributing certain facts and ideas to that routine that you might have. Or you can attribute it rather to routines to certain places in your house, and you can create different rooms for different subjects. So the idea is that if I'm trying to remember a quote from Macbeth, and I attach the first one, I'm thinking Act 1 is when the dog's on me in the morning. I'm thinking of, Macbeth with his sort of brandish steel, which smoke with bloody execution. That is my association. Dog, sadly, Macbeth killing people. And then I get up, I have my drink of water, and then I might associate that with a quote from Lady Macbeth, and so on and so forth. But the key thing where it's not to confuse is then not to attach geography, sort of memory ideas, geography facts to the same thing. Otherwise you get mixed up. I need to just make sure that when I think of the dog, I think of Macbeth. And then if I go into the kitchen and I talk about what I do when I go in the kitchen, that is a different subject. And so that was one of the key things that came out of this sort of memory program, was about different palaces, if you like, for different memory palaces for different subjects. As you can see here, one I found on the web, where people trying to remember something as simple as the order of the planets, which we all know we can do with a mnemonic as well. But here was, sort of they've gone from the fan to the different cupboards, to the fridge, to the surface, to the oven, and to the table. And it might be that you do things that way. You come in, what is it that you do when you go to the kitchen, and associating those actions with facts. Or another one that I've seen students do before is put post-it notes on those places around the house, so that when you visit certain places, you go in certain rooms, you've got little post-it notes, cards around the house, and you can, the young people, if you're watching this, you can tell your parents, don't touch the extractor fan, that's mercury, or or that's the digestive system. And so you can have different areas of the house in different routines that help you to remember things. Now, going back to the Chinese and the Koreans, that apparently helped them to memorize, and they were testing it on people who aren't memory experts. People have been proven to remember far many more things based on a routine that they do. Now, the walk to school is a really good one, because they do it every day. Young people, they go past the post box, they might meet such and such a body on the corner, and then they might have to get their phone out for their card for the bus. each one of those routines and those kind of habits can be attached to a fact. And it does work. Another one is a playing cards one, which I didn't put on here, which is very, very similar. You can attach, it's a bit like dual coding. You can attach an idea or a word to something on a card. Now, simple ones about memorizing people and places. One person said that they memorized the 10 of diamonds. To help remember the 10 of diamonds, they thought of Boris Johnson because he was in 10D, 10 Downing Street at the time. Now, obviously, we've had about 11 prime ministers since then, but that's the idea, is that you can use a deck of cards as well to help you remember certain key features and key facts. So it's about trying to be creative, not just so it doesn't get boring for our young people, but also using proven ways of trying to make our memories work for us rather than against us. And so then the last one I've got here is just talking about things that Rachel's really already said about being kind, and about this idea that Rachel mentioned about movements and about getting outside, rather than being sedentary. I was very sort of tempted to put a game console on here because I know my son loves his gaming, but that's just more mental stimulation in a way. And what we're trying to do here is to reward ourselves with the key things that you know might give us those dopamine levels, you know, like a donut or or a Diet Coke. Take your dog out, go and do a bit of exercise as well. So the Pomodoro technique encourages that. You know, I sometimes when my children are working, I'll come up and I'll give them, biscuits after they've been working for about half an hour. And so it's about maybe having those little rewards to keep those dopamine levels high in between their sort of revision. So that is a whirlwind tour of some revision strategies that I hope you found useful, all dual coded, of course, so that hopefully you'll remember it. And then I can see there's some questions popping up, so I will see what some of them are. Georgina said, I had a photosynthesis map on the bathroom door for daily revision. Given how long my son spends in the toilet, that is a good idea. I like that. Kingdoms classes in biology. Mind-blowing, says D. Yeah, Feynman technique. What is the Feynman technique? What's that one? I don't know, I've heard that one.
Yeah, it's basic. He's a really, I think he might be a Nobel Prize winning physicist, but the Feynman technique is basically exactly what you said, Andrea, which is this idea that you want to teach it to someone else in a simple way. And yeah, the Feynman technique is just this, can you teach it to a 5-year-old? Like that is his criteria for knowing a subject really well. You can explain it to a 5-year-old.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
to anybody.
Yeah.
That's where you drag your 5-year-olds in and then you can get them to be tested on photosynthesis. What is that?
I know, I'm thinking, I can't imagine many 5-year-olds that I know that would sit through that. I think it's conceptually rather than reality, right?
Yeah. Has anybody got any questions? I did obviously race through things there because a lot of it will be on record and the images are there, and I'm happy to sort of share my slides with Georgina afterwards so you can get them. But has anybody got any questions? Are people just digesting it all?
Hopefully they're all off doing their revision.
They might be now. Go making flashcards.
Yeah.
People will be up downstairs. There'll be parents getting up and there'll be things like plastered to the walls around the house.
I hope so. I think we should put it to the test. We should, after students have done their exams, ask parents some GCSE questions. Like, how much of this have you accidentally absorbed from your kids?
Exactly. It'd be more. And I think that diagrams, just to go back, diagrams in science, PE, geography, again, those graphic organisers ideas and maps. If you've got budding artists or people that do love sketching, that's just a great thing to do. And I think it's a good place to sort of have them in different areas of the house. And even with Macbeth, I sometimes get people to draw the sort of the concept of the play, what happens and when, key things that happen in the play. Whenever there's a death, I've sometimes done cross swords, and then they have to put that down as they're reading through it. So the dual coding idea, in whatever way you do it, is I'm just such a big fan of that as a way of remembering things.
I love it. Now it works for so many different things as well. So that's really fantastic. I'm going to be putting these to the test. And I guess because there's a mixture of parents and tutors here, like if we model them in our own tuition sessions, then students will hopefully start doing them for themselves. It sounds great.
That I will stop
very much.
sharing my screen. What I can do now, if people want, obviously in the chat, I can pop my slides in if anybody would like them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that now while you're talking, Georgina, and I'll make sure I get them in there.
Thank you very much.
It's all right. It's a pleasure.
Wonderful. We're continuing to be spoiled here, because I know I told you that we'd be finishing now, but we're not. We've got an extra bonus. Sarah Lynn is here. Thank you very much, Sarah Lynn. So we've got dessert basically. We have pudding.
It's a high standard dessert.
You are pudding today. Welcome, pudding. Thank you very much.
Amazing.
Thank you very much. So I have introduced you previously, so we've shared your experience, but I know some people have joined since. So Sarah Lynn is from Bettering Youth, and I've been working with Sarah Lynn over the past year, increasingly as the year goes on, various different projects. So we share this similar focus in supporting the well-being around exams and the things that can quite easily get on top of students with all of the things we've been talking about today. When we put too much pressure on ourselves, it gets a bit much. So I am looking forward to you experiencing the fantastic advice that you'll have from Sarah Lynn today. Thank you very much for coming and joining us.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for having me, Georgina. My name is Sarah Lynn. I use the pronouns she, her, and as Georgina said, I'm the founder of Bettering Youth, which is an academic tutoring company that blends in emotional well-being coaching. So I'm really overjoyed that you're here with me tonight to talk about how we can prioritize and honor children's well-being during the really intense process of preparing for GCSEs or A-levels or whichever exam that they're preparing for. So if my eyes are kind of wandering, it's because I've tried to set myself up so it could be the best situation for you. So I've got notes and different things on different places, but I am 100% here with you guys today. So who is ready to learn about practical and effective ways that we can support our young adults with their well-being? We all ready? Woo! Okay, perfect. So I just want you to know that this is an interactive workshop. So please talk to me, whether it's in the chat box or raising your hand. I will be kind of keeping an eye on that so that way there we can all make sure that this is a conversation. So I'm going to jump right in and I'm going to use that conversation or that line that we're all probably sick and tired of hearing. And that line is, can you see my screen? Amazing. Thank you so much. So today we are hopping in. Now, what I want to do is prepare or present with you a little bit of context. So in 2021, the National Center for Social Research told us or came to the conclusion that children who experienced mental difficulties were 2 times as likely to not reach the benchmark of obtaining their 5 GCSEs, which is an A star to a C, or now a 9 to a 4, in comparison to 30% of their peers with typical levels of development. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When I was doing some research on the correlation between our academic success and our well-being, everyone is out on their own decision. There is definitely some strong research that supports that there is a correlation, but there's also some research that refutes it. So I'm not going to tell you which camp to be in, where to put your own belief system. Instead, what my hope is for you today is to just give you good practice, ways that we as professionals and as parents can work with and support our students' well-being. So it doesn't matter if we're doing it for the grades or if we're just doing it for general care, we can use these tasks and put them to good use. So I'm sure you're all kind of wondering, who is this girl? Why is she here? And I know Georgina gave me a very lovely introduction, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of my own personal journey. So I left the classroom in 2017. I went back to school to become certified in cognitive behavior therapy and mindfulness training. We launched a lot of different fantastic resources for the community in supporting student well-being. And then just before lockdown and everything officially went online in 2018, 2018, we put ourselves online, and we've just gone from strength to strength, connecting with other educators who are just as passionate on supporting student well-being as we are. So what I'd like to do right now is to ask for your permission. May I share with you the 5 different ways that we can help our students support their well-being during exam prep? We all good with that? Yeah. Perfect. Fantastic. So let's get settled. In order to get settled, what I'd like for us to do is just sit up nice and tall. Feel the seat kind of have you and keep you nice and comfortable. We're just going to roll our shoulders back and down. And I'm just going to ask for you to join me in 3 big deep breaths. So we're feeling that lung expand, bringing the air in through the nose and out through the mouth. Last one. Thank you for that. Okay, so we are going to go on a journey together today. Whenever we're on a journey or a road trip, there are always things that we come across, and no, it is not the sheep. We always come across sets of lights, right? We have our red lights, our yellow lights, and our green lights. And these lights are going to impact how we might perceive our road trip. It might be something that we feel like we're able to just fly through and we didn't even realize how quickly we got from point A to B. Or we could feel like this time is taking us forever, much longer than we ever planned for. And the same thing is happening when we're looking at our journey with exam preparation. So my hope for us today is to go through the 5 different stages or places that we should be looking at when we're helping students prepare for exams. We're going to move through these ourselves today, and we're going to do a little bit of self-assessment. We are going to determine if we are feeling more of a red light towards the location, a yellow light, or a green light. Now, just like you would in a car, your red light means that you're at a complete stop. You are not feeling comfortable. There's lots of blockages. You just don't feel as though you can progress in this area. Your yellow light means there's a lot of stop starts. And of course, your green means that you're sailing on through. So what I'm going to ask that you do is, if you don't already, pull out a pencil and a paper. This is going to be especially effective for students, but as parents and educators, it's always good to know what we're going to ask our students to go through. So go ahead and join me on this as well. I'd like for you to write down these 5 different titles. So we have self-care, learning strategies, revision strategies, community, and planning. And as we go through each of those locations, I'm going to ask you to self-assess. Are you a red, a yellow, or a green? You can put them on your paper, and if you're feeling happy and confident, you could pop it up in the chat box and we can go through it together. So let's start with our first checkpoint. We're looking at self-care. So this is a place where you are going to be determining how you are showing up for yourself. Now, self-care has this weird reputation of being bubble baths and reading and face masks and all of this lovely, good stuff. But self-care can also be really uncomfortable sometimes, right? It could be about learning when to step away from your revision because you need to rest. Or as we talked about earlier, the importance of sleep. Those are things that are considered self-care when we acknowledge when enough is enough. So I'm just going to pull up the chat because I see some lovely things coming through. If you're happy to, chat if you're feeling like you are a red, a yellow, or and if not, make sure you have it on your sheet beside you. Excellent. So we have a lot of different mixture of colors coming through. We have a lot of yellows coming through, which yellow for self-care means that we might have the good intentions, but we're not quite following through. And what I want us to remember is that none of this is a putting you under the microscope or trying to make you feel as though we're looking at you very critically. This is just for us to have an idea of where we can go and how we can continue to progress. moving to our second location, which are our learning strategies. So our learning strategies really is about, do you understand how you learn best? Do you know if you work best in a quiet environment, or do you need to have background noise? Do you prefer to work with a study buddy, or do you need that solitude? Do you have a really good understanding of how you learn? Now, if you're not sure at all, and it shows in your assessments, then you're in the red zone. If you absolutely know it, you nail it because you honor it at all times, you're sailing through with that green. If you're somewhere in the middle, then you would be a yellow. So again, you can place it down on your piece of paper or into the chat box. I can see Georgina is a green, and I can attest that she's there. She knows who she is when it comes to those learning strategies. Amazing. So we're going to be moving forward to our third location, which are revision strategies. So revision strategies, we went through so many fantastic ones with Andrea. When we were listening to those revision strategies, did you feel like, yes, I knew I could do that, I'm doing it, and it works for me? Or were you thinking more so, actually, I've just been maybe copying down what I see from the textbook word for word, rather than going through and actively participating with the knowledge? So understanding how you understand revision, but also how you're effectively implementing it. Because it's all well and good to know about the Lightner and the Freyer and all of these wonderful big names, but if we're not implementing them, then we're probably not benefiting from them. So what's the point of knowing them? So we're going to move on to our fourth checkpoint, and that is our community checkpoint. So community checkpoint is a very important factor when we're supporting student well-being, and it's often one that is overlooked. When we feel isolated and we don't know how to ask for help, or we don't feel like we have the power to ask for help, then we start to go through a little bit of a spiral, right? When we feel like we need help, but we can't get it, we can start looking towards other parts of our lives where we just don't feel like we're connected. And as human beings, that's one of our basic needs, is to feel connected. So this can very easily trickle into an anxiety spiral or a shame storm. So understanding how we can ask for help, how we can connect with others in our struggle, is going to allow us to move through this entire process a little bit easier. Now, when we're talking about community, it's important to acknowledge that it's not just about your tutors and your teachers or even your parents. Having a study buddy, having friends, having siblings or extended family, or even people that you might study with online. There's, especially after lockdown, there was this huge trend of going onto YouTube and studying with someone while they were studying and never speaking, right? Having those co-working spaces or those silent power hours, having that space where you can just be held accountable to do the work by that social obligation of being there and getting the work done, but not necessarily having any conversation. That's also a way that we can implement that community. Yeah, absolutely. Georgina, I see that you're saying it's very difficult to ask for help. And I agree 100%. So as we're looking, as we're talking as educators and as parents, finding ways that we can make it easy for our students and our children to ask for help by providing them lots of opportunities and check-in points, it allows the process of asking for help to A, become a lot easier, but B, it becomes more of a habit, and it becomes something that they feel, it's like a muscle, it grows a little bit stronger, and it encourages them to acknowledge that we're stronger together. And lastly, we are off to our final destination, which is the planning checkpoint. So the planning checkpoint, this is definitely highlighted by our guest speakers today, looking at not only knowing that you're going to be studying maths and physics and science, but knowing specifically what topic are you going to be looking at, how much time do you think you're going to need for it, knowing how you're going to break down that big scary goal of perhaps doing a mock paper. How are you going to break that down so it's not just sitting and doing the mocks every single day? How can we break that down? So where on that confidence scale are you? Are you more on the red zone, so you're a last minute person, procrastination is your middle name? Are you more in the middle where you have good intentions, but you're still barely making those deadlines? Or are you embracing your Georgina and you are in that green zone? You have a plan, you stick to it because it is scientific and it works. It's methodical. Perfect. And of course, I want us to acknowledge that there is no right or wrong reason or right or wrong way. Through my entire experience through coaching and talking, I realized that how I see something and how my brain might internalize and prepare could be very different, or actually I already know is very different than many of you who are on this call. And that's amazing. So when we're looking at this red, yellow, green, it's just a visual representation. Just because we're in the red or in the yellow because you're more of a procrastinator, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a negative. This is just about finding ways that we can honor what our skills are so they support our well-being at the end of the day, so we could avoid that burnout. Okay, now I've been chatting for quite a bit, and I want you, of course, to remember that you're human, and the journey to getting a little bit better each and every day is why we're here. It's not about sailing through, having greens the entire time, because that would be boring, and you would get to your journey without having any detours, and sometimes the detours are the best part. So let's just take a moment. I feel as though we've been sitting here for a little bit. Before we tally it up, I just want to do another little brain break because I don't know about you, but it's Friday and I'm feeling a little antsy after a long week. So all we're going to do is we're going to do 3 shoulder rolls backwards. So right up towards the ears, back of the room, down towards the floor, and all the way forward. Smooth it out, feeling every point. Good. One more. Connecting to that breath. Amazing. Come center. We're just going to rotate our torso from one side, reaching as far as you can, keeping those hips still, and again to the other side. We're going to do 3 on both sides. Connecting into that breath. Good. Last round. Amazing. When you're ready, come through center. Nice big deep belly breath. I'm going to put my hand on my belly this time just so I feel it. Amazing. I feel a little bit more oxygenated, which is good on a Friday evening. So take a moment, squish yourself back in, take a peek at your page, and let's tally it up. Let's take a look. Where do you feel you had the majority of your yellows? Where did you feel more confident? Was it under the self-care section, the learning strategies, the revision, the community, the planning? Where did you feel most confident? And finally, where do you feel like you might need to focus your time? Now, I know this might feel counterintuitive because exams are coming, so you're thinking, let's just jump straight in to that revision. Let's just jump straight into those learning strategies. But if we're not aware of the revision strategies, how can we be sure that we're going to be effectively revising? If we're not planning appropriately, how do we know we're going to cover everything on time? If we don't have a community, how are we going to make sure that on a Friday night when we decide to have our break time, we're not actually going to be better off just continuing to work because we haven't communicated with our friends or family that we want to have that time with them? So this is the pre-planning stage, right? This is the self-awareness stage. Before we even get started, it's important to know where your strengths are in this entire journey. Let's look at it as a long-term situation. Amazing. Anybody want to share which ones they felt most confident with, or which one they felt they might need to focus time and attention to before we get started with that prep. I love this, Georgina. Can I just read this out? It says, plans don't have to be followed to the letter for it to work. They're a best case scenario, and we tweak them as we implement them. Perfect. I love that. And I think this is something that's very sensible to be talking about, because of course we want to have the plan and we want to have that long-term range, and we want to know and be armed with all of these fantastic learning strategies and revision strategies. But like one of my students yesterday, we were doing some academic coaching, and she said yesterday was a complete fail. I spent half the day going through my entire history, and then halfway through I realized that I'd been revising completely wrong, because I was revising for a question and answer type of test. But then I realized that that's not how they ask me those questions. They actually ask me very open-ended questions, like what happened in the 1950s in Japan. And because she was studying in a flashcard kind of situation, she was not going to be prepared for that more blurting type kind of question. So then she had to reassess and refocus her energies. And she came to her session feeling completely defeated, but I thought that was a complete win. The fact that she acknowledged for herself that she had done the wrong strategy, had time to reassess, and then was able to tweak her plan a little bit to allow for that room, was a huge success, because she was able to participate and actively engage with her learning process. So she wasn't just putting her head down. She wasn't just getting it done just to have that tick at the end of the day. She was actually and effectively going through it and saying, is this working? Why not? Amazing. So what I would like for us to do is just go through a highlight of the 3 key things that as parents and educators, we can do to really support our student well-being. So of course, we have our student well-being plan with our 5 locations and having them go through that. But as parents and as educators, there really are 3 things that we coach our parents to do. And the first is to ask for permission. Now, if you noticed, the 3 things that we're going to go through today are actually the 3 things that I also did with you. At the very beginning, I asked for your permission, because I don't want to jump in with my, with my cape and my magic wand and just assume that I know better than you. I want this to be an opportunity where you're in a place where you can say, yes, I'm ready to take this on board. The same thing is there for our students, right? Whether we're in a parent role or in an educator's role, we might see them struggling. And of course, instinctively, all we want to do is help. So we might just jump in there and want to provide them with an answer. But sometimes they just need space. They just need to be validated. They just need us to know that they're struggling right now, but that's all they want. So it's important, before we jump in with our rah, you can do it, it's important to ask them for permission. Is this something you want help with? How can I help you? By doing that, we're also modeling asking for support. The second thing that we can do is put in those reminders for well-being. And Andrea, you said this as well. You said when your children are doing revising, sometimes you bring up a couple biscuits for them to help them keep those dopamine levels. Or you might encourage your students to keep up with their exercise, even if it is tweaking a little bit. Just like adults, sometimes our students or our children, they're going to find themselves at the mercy of the I just need to get it done, right? Just like us, sometimes we'd be sitting at our desk and we look at the time and it's 3 o'clock and we realize, oh my goodness, where did the day go? I haven't even eaten. I haven't even gone outside. I haven't even gone to the loo. Like, where did the day go? That happens to us. So of course it's going to happen to our students. So finding ways that we can gently remind them, you know what, maybe in an hour, we all go for a walk, or maybe in an hour you take time off. Give them a little bit of space. Don't spring it upon them, because that's not going to go down well, but giving them those reminders that, hey, if you don't look after yourself, you're not going to even make it to the end where you need to perform. And then lastly, it's facilitating the ability for them to become self-aware. So just like I did with you, it's asking them questions. Okay, why do you feel like doing flashcards is the best way for you to learn math? Is there maybe another way that we can do it? Have you talked to your friends about ways that they can do it? Don't go in and say that's wrong and that's not how we should do it, or explain to them the best way to do it. Ask for permission and then get curious. That's the best way that we can kind of navigate those situations where these children that we're supporting, they're becoming a little bit more independent. They're becoming a little bit more self-driven and self-motivated, but maybe not to the extent where we as adults would want them to be. We have to find that fine balance in how we can support them, but also facilitate support for them. So those are the 3 key ways that us as educators and as parents can support student well-being in preparation for their exams. That is all that I have. Of course, I have a blog that, as you can see, we have lots of different conversations about exam prep. And in the Mindful Toolbox, there's lots of different podcast episodes about how we can further enrich our communication and our boundaries and understanding thoughts and belief patterns. So that's me for today. And are there any questions? You're all just digesting.
Thank you. There's some comments on there's a couple of people watching on Facebook, and they were kind of joining in with your review session. They're saying that they're not really good at revision strategies, which is kind of calling back to what you said. I'm not good at this is not the way that we phrase this.
Well, I mean, it's important to have that acknowledgement that this is an area that we need to spend more energy focusing on. But I think it's really important to remember that you might not be good at it, but you just had a fantastic half an hour with Andrea, who was talking about revision. You also had how we can handle anxiety with Rachel. So there's so many ways that we can build these skills if we have the awareness that we need to build them.
Yeah. It's very nice to add yet. I'm not good at this yet.
Yes.
You will see.
Cute. I love that as well. This is a good reminder from Rachel. She says this is a marathon and not a sprint. And the only way that we can approach it as a marathon is by doing that pre-planning, right? Is by having the awareness of where you need to spend your time. I love that. Yeah, that's a good question, Dee. Dee's asked if students get guided on best strategies for revision in school. I'm not a practicing teacher at the moment, but when I was teaching, we might have like surface level, I would say. Yeah, it definitely has to be modeled, and it definitely needs to be something that we put in place for them. And I think that's why we have people like Rachel and myself and Georgina who are making this something that we do to equip our students with, because it's the expectation that they have it and they don't. There we go. Heather says we do, but it could be better. How do you think it could be better, Heather? We have a great question here from Allison as well. She says, how do you assess learning? So she's a GCSE maths tutor, and she uses red, amber, and green for self-assessment. I think that's a really good starting point, right? Having the student be able to understand if they are confident or not confident. I also use a scale, a number scale. I would say on a scale of 1 to 7, how confident do you feel in doing this question? And I use 7 because there is no middle. So it makes them really decide, are they more or less confident? And I ask them to do it before we actually start the question together. So they could do a pre-assessment and then they could do a post-assessment. And it's also interesting to see if those are married up in alignment, because then it tells you how in tune the student is with themselves. Oh, thank you for answering, Heather. So Heather said, giving the time that it deserves and not raced through. And that was in regards to being taught about studying techniques. Yeah, it is important. So spending the time. Rachel added, some schools do it a bit. I think lots of schools recognize it's important, but it's difficult to make the time for it within the curriculum. Yeah. Perfect. And you also coach students in it with different local schools. That's really good, Rachel. I always start a session asking my tutee if a student, yeah. So starting your sessions with doing that self-assessment is fantastic. Having them go through the process. Amazing. Yeah, Allison, sometimes we're not going to have that self-awareness from our students, right? Sometimes they're not going to be able to identify if they are red, amber, green, or if they are a level 1 to 7. What we can do as well is we can ask them to use emojis, right? Sometimes I'll ask a couple of my students to pull up the reaction bar, and if they are a thumbs up, it means that they're like a yellow. If it's a shock face, maybe it's on that red, and if it's a celebration, then it's a green. So finding ways that we can make this accessible to them, because they might not have the language, and that's okay. We don't want that to be the barrier for us understanding where they are. So finding different ways that we can help them through that process, or even giving them the language. So going through maybe breaking down part of the question. So if we were looking at how to find percentage of a number, you might ask them, what's your process? If they had a process, then you might think, perfect, I feel like this is like a celebratory emoji moment, right? Like, I feel like this is a green moment. What do you think? And the more that we can model that kind of conversation with them, the easier it will be for them to implement it for themselves. Yeah, Georgina says, if you ask an open question, the answer will be, it's okay. Is that an open question or a closed question?
Oh yeah, it's just, how's it going? It's always, yes, okay. When you
Yeah.
invite, it's okay.
Yeah, if you want something, you need to be very direct. So I always ask, like, what was exciting about your day today? Because then they have to give you something. Or what did you find was curious about your day? Something that they could really pull up for you. So it's not just, how was the day? Yeah, same as always, which is very typical. Could you please tell me how to study our least favorite subject or difficult subject? Gamification? I feel like both Rachel and Andrea and Georgina, you guys can add on these questions as well. Gamification would probably be a great way to jumpstart your motivation when you're not keen on a subject.
It depends what it is as well. Like, why are you pushing yourself to do something that you hate? If it's because it's something that you actually have to improve your grade on, like it's maths or English and you have to pass it to continue, then there's tools that you can use for that. If it's something that actually isn't going to make a difference to what you want to do in the future, why are you torturing yourself? Go easier.
I was going to say, Alvina, what are you? Are you happy to come on the mic? You don't have to put your camera on and share a little bit more about what are you doing at the moment when it's a subject you don't like, or when it's difficult? What's your current approach? Okay, cannot speak. Okay, that's fine. One thing I would add, and I'm with you, Georgina, right? If it's, especially if you're, I always, when I'm speaking, I'm talking about GCSE and A-level students. These are students that are doing the subject, as opposed to a year 9 or a year 8, where, especially if you're not taking it at GCSE, oh yeah, I mean, don't pain yourself over it. But what I would say with the students that I've spoken to, Alvina, and the students that I work with, I think there is a real temptation to work on things that we love and that bring us joy. And that's obviously great. But if we want to improve our grades, then that is really at tension with that. So when I'm working with students and I'm talking to them about how to study and where to prioritize, I always say we're always trying to work on what your weaknesses are. And by the very nature of knocking off all the things that you're not very good at and detangling those pain points, there's probably not as much joy in that. So one of the things that I would suggest, Alvina, that can work quite well is when you first get back from school, I don't know if you've ever used or college, if you use the Pomodoro technique, start with a subject you hate, start with what you don't want to do and think, okay, I'll do 25 minutes, I'll set a timer and just knock it off. And then at the end, you know, then do a subject that's maybe okay, and then finish your night with something you're like, oh, I love that. So that when you're tired and, you know, then you can do something that brings you joy. The other things that can work is thinking about breaks, thinking about like planning something so fun at the weekend and having rewards in there, or thinking, how can I make this more fun? Like sometimes when I'm working, I have to do things I hate, and I think, well, you know, that's just life, right? Everyone's going to wash the dishes. So I think, oh, can I go and grab myself a coffee? Can I, you know, what can I do to make this experience more pleasurable? Can I put on some music? There's lots of research that shows that actually it's not good for learning to have music on. But if you have music that doesn't have any lyrics, then sometimes I think, do you know what? Yes, okay, I'm 5% or 10% less effective. But if it's bringing you joy and gets you to do it, then, you know, it could be the difference between being 0% effective. So I don't know, Alvina, what's running through your mind as we've talked about these things? What's coming up for you? Or what's helpful?
It's probably an element that I certainly see in that it might be a subject that a student previously did actually enjoy and chose at GCSE, but as soon as you've got to do it and there's an exam at the end of it, it kind of kills the fun a bit. So reminding yourself actually what you do enjoy about it, and not focusing so much on the exam can bring that back a little bit.
Definitely. And even the subjects, I think back to things I loved, sometimes towards the exam when the pressure is on, even things that you previously loved, you can start to hate. So it's, I guess there's this natural ebb and flow. And I work with a lot of A-level students as well, and they've chosen all the things that they enjoy most. And even then they can quite often end up hating aspects of the course. Yeah.
So I hate it myself. Like if someone tells me to do something that I was actually planning to do, I immediately want to do it less.
100%. I am with you.
We like to be in control of our own lives. Oh, I love it. Perfect. I think so. People are continuing the conversation, and please do. We can still see the conversation in Zoom. We can still see the conversation on Facebook, and obviously the conversation in Zoom is going to end with the call, but the conversation on Facebook will continue. So please do keep coming and asking questions and joining in. This is really very helpful, and at the very least, it's very helpful to see that everybody is struggling here, and we've all struggled despite having devoted our lives to doing this all day every day. So it's completely normal. It's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's part of the process. I promised some additional things at the end, so I'm going to share screen, and if you do have more questions, we'll come back to them later. But there's a few things I wanted to share with you before you disappear and have your takeaway or whatever you're planning to do on your Friday evening. So thank you very much so far for everybody that's spoken today. This has been wonderful, and I really appreciate that you've given us your time on a Friday evening when I'm sure that there are many exciting things that you could be doing, and I hope that it's made a massive difference for everybody that showed up to listen and join in the conversation today. All very, very experienced and very knowledgeable people in the field of GCSE prep. So if you have questions, do get in touch with any of the people that have presented today. And we also have some prize announcements that I'm going to share, and a special opportunity that I'm going to share with you as well. But first up, I promised in the promotions that there's an exciting announcement that I wanted to share with you. So you might have been wondering what that is. So this is very exciting. I've heard what you've been sharing, so in the group and on the conversations that we've been having on the social media comments and in the things that you've been talking about today. And I can understand the challenges that are being faced in preparing for GCSEs, because obviously I've been here for the past decade supporting people with their GCSE preparations, and that especially this year I think there's a lot of nerves around what's going to happen with the exams, and are we prepared enough, and have we missed any of our learning, or what are the grade boundaries going to look like. I think people are very daunted by what's going to be happening this summer, and I wanted to be able to find a way to share the support that I offer students in that one-to-one setting with everybody, with more students ahead of their exams. But of course, not everybody's able to schedule one-to-one tuition, and it's often about more than that. actually, because as we talked about right at the beginning, you can have regular sessions with a tutor to support you in a particular exam, and as Rachel mentioned, it might help you with the one that you're having the support with, but what happens with everything else, and life messing with your plans. So students want to be able to feel in control of their own success rather than handing it over to somebody else. So whilst I was sitting eating my mince pies over the Christmas break, I put together what I think is the most exciting thing that I've ever done. Maybe you'll agree with me. The GCSE Success Programme. So as of about 20 minutes ago, this is available on my website, and I've put together a programme to cover a lot of the things that have been discussed today, and a lot of the things that I have in these regular conversations with my students, in a easy to follow bite-sized programme that lasts over 8 weeks. So I'm excited to share the details of this with you. Have a look at this. These are the 8 modules that we'll be going through in the session. So starting with getting set up, because potentially you haven't actually been very good in habits or in studying at home in the past, or it's not actually that easy for you to work at home because you've got younger siblings and it's noisy and you don't have a place to comfortably sit. We'll go through making sure that you are comfortable at home and that you know exactly where your work places and where your rest places, and you're organized and can get started. How to get motivated. So I was talking earlier about setting goals that will keep you motivated forever, and finding ways of making what might be onerous a bit more enjoyable, so that it actually does feel like you're making progress and you're not just torturing yourself with your textbooks. Then to get scheduling. So how would you actually make a revision schedule that you can keep on top of? We saw an example that Andrea had shared for one of her students. What does your week ordinarily look like, and how can you actually manage the things that you have to do without giving up the things that you want to do? How to actually revise. So you've made that time to revise. What do you actually do in that revision session? How do you study? What's it going to look like, and how's it going to be effective? And when we find those really effective strategies, we don't have to spend so long at the desk, because the time that we've spent has actually been effective. So you can study and then you can go and enjoy yourself. There's time in the middle for some implementation. So I know that usually over the course of 8 weeks, other things will have come up. So it's not going to be hardcore back-to-back work for you to do. We'll have a break in the middle for you to implement everything that we've learned, and I'll still be available if you have questions. But if you're planning a holiday for half term, you can still go and have your holiday and come back, and you won't have missed any new content. We'll focus on how you can support your well-being, as we heard from Sarah Lynn and from Rachel. How can you make sure that's covered and not forget, like I mentioned in the chat, is there a habit that I have too often. I've made a lovely plan and now I'm going to go nuts on implementing the plan, and then I'm going to forget that I do actually have to look after my well-being in the middle. Building those good habits that are going to set you up for success longer term. So step by step, changing some of the bad habits that you might have got into over time into some really good habits that can help us to feel good through the entire GCSE season. And then ultimately, because unfortunately we do actually have to sit an exam at the end of the process, how do we prepare for that and make it less terrifying and more manageable? I'm really, really excited to be able to share all of this with you. So here's how that's going to look. Basically, we've got the what's included, how's it going to be implemented. So you'll get some fantastic course materials that you should be able to work through in your own time on the website. You'll also get an 8-week live coaching program. So each of those 8 weeks, there'll be a live session where you can come and ask any questions about what you've been implementing in the online program, and you can hear from others about how they've implemented it. If you've got anything you're finding challenging, you'll have time to ask for help. There's also a bolt-on parent program. So there will be students that are going through the process, but for parents, as we mentioned, they also have a lot of anxiety for their children, and they're not attending school and learning about this is what the exam is going to look like, this is what the schedule is going to look like, this is what we're going to need to do to prepare. So actually it's quite helpful for the parents to have somewhere for them to get that information as well. And they're very busy. I'm sure you're very busy. You don't want to spend time having to look for that information. So I've put together an easy to access module specifically for parents to access, and a support group. so that when it's all getting a bit too much, you have somewhere that you can go and ask, what's going on with this? Where do I find this? How do I help my child with this? Without having to post it on social media or ask around friends and things like that. There's some template schedules, so everything that we do in the program, I'll build examples and templates so that it's really easy to implement, and step-by-step workbooks so that all of that can be completed by students in their own time. And alongside all of that, I've added a couple of bonuses. So as well as the program, just to help to make this as effective as possible, because my goal is that this is actually going to work for you, right? I really want you to succeed with this. I've added access to the Complete Maths classroom because Complete Maths have set up a fantastic entire scope curriculum from early years to the first year of your maths degree that's covering step by step what you need to learn in the way that Andrea shared, with the examples and non-examples and the goals for each of the sections. It's a fantastic library, and they mentioned that it might extend beyond maths, so that's going to be a really useful resource through the year. Plus a CGP book bundle, because they are my favourite resource for revision. I've got absolutely loads. I've even got the ones that I bought back in the year 2000 to do my own GCSEs. I've still got those. They're fantastic resources for just like bite-sized revision, and they only cover exactly what you need. So you'll receive a package of those too. So if we were to offer all of that, if you were to buy all of that for yourself, it would probably be over £1,000 worth of resource, and that wouldn't be very accessible to most people to pay in one go in the January right after you've had probably quite an expensive Christmas, because we didn't have one for the last 2 years. So I'm sure you went nuts, and why shouldn't you? Instead, it's £150, because like I said, I want everybody to be able to access this, and I want you to be able to really get success with this program. So I tried to make it as affordable as possible. If you would like to sign up for that, and I really hope that you would like to, and I'll be able to work with many of you in there, you can access that at this link, so GCSE Success Programme on the Green Tutors website, and I shall put that in the chat as well, so that you don't have to go and look for it. Everything that I've explained is in there, the details of all of the modules, how to sign up, the price, the dates of the live sessions, and some frequently asked questions are on there. But if you have any questions around that you'd like to ask now, then please do. I'm very excited about it. So I can see some stuff in the chat. It doesn't look like you guys have some more questions around the speakers. Yes. Love CGP and Complete Maths. They're brilliant. Prizes for the resilient folks who are still here with us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for staying to the end of the session. I know it's been a long old day, but I really appreciate you being here. So I've put some stuff together just to treat you for it. So first up, for the most engaged participant today, who's been really getting involved in the chat and sharing and being really basically making it more engaging for the speakers and more valuable for the attendees, we've got a spot on the programme that I have just shared with you, so you won't have to sign up, you can just have it. And I think actually probably the most engaged person, and the person who isn't a tutor and probably doesn't want it, I think would be Alvina. So Alvina Campbell, I'll be happy to share with you access to that programme. You can send me a message with your email address and I will send that over to you. I'm also going to share with you after the session a survey for some feedback on how the summit went, any suggestions that you could share around us, what we could improve next time, or anything else that you might like to see, or for the programme itself, because that's really useful for us. We've all had a blast sharing this with you, so I think we'd probably like to do it again, but it'd be really helpful to have your feedback on how that could be improved. So for anybody that fills in that survey for us, you could win a spot on the GCSE Maths group class, which I'm running for the rest of 2023, well, until the exams, which would ordinarily cost £400. So one of the survey participants would just get a free spot on there. And if you're interested in also sharing the GCSE Success Programme with other people that you know, there's an option to be an affiliate, so you can sign up and get 10% commission on everybody that that buys that program through your link. And for the best affiliate, I'll be sending out a hotel chocolate hamper, so you can enjoy some chocolate to celebrate having spread the word. Thank you very much. So there's a few prizes available. Even we've got a prize shared today for Alvina, and for the folks who perhaps are watching later, there's still options for you to win prizes there. So how can you become an affiliate if you're interested in doing that? The same website that I just shared. In the menu at the top, you'll see 4 tutors, and under there is an affiliate dashboard. I'll share that link as well in the chat. Gosh, can't cope with this many windows. There we are. Fab. You're very welcome, Alvina. Have I actually crumbs? Thank you very much. I've actually got to the end of the slides. Amazing. Thank you very much, everybody that's with us today. Thank you for joining in the conversation. This has been amazing. I've had a lovely time. I hope you've had a lovely time. I hope you've got a load of valuable things that you're going to be able to use through the year, your conversations with your children, or for the students themselves, or for the tutors, that you can have conversations with your students. Thank you very much. This has been wonderful. We have a few minutes. If anybody has any questions or anything that they'd like to share, please do. Otherwise, keep an eye on your inboxes, because you'll be receiving recording resources and the potential to win some prizes. Stop our live. Thank you very much.